morning.
Good morning.
Welcome. Glad you're here this morning. And I hope you'll be uplifted by the time that we're done. Scripture reading comes from 1 Samuel chapter 9, verses 1 through 3. It says, there was a Benjamite of a man of standing whose name was Kish, son of Abiel, the son of Zeor, and the son of Bacheroth, the son of Ananiah of Benjamin. He had a son named Saul, an impressive young man, without equal among the Israelites, a head taller than any of the others. Now the donkeys belonging to Saul's father Kish were lost. And Kish said to his son Saul, take one of the servants with you and go look for the donkeys. Today our title is called Chasing Donkeys. As we look at our text, we see, well, we learn a lot about Saul. We see that he has a great heritage. He comes from the tribe of Benjamin. His family was very prominent. It was one of power, one of valor. He was a head taller than everyone in Israel. Now, this would put pressure on Saul, coming from a family like that. He would have to continue the heritage. And he would be prompted to pass it on. That's the way it worked in the ancient Near East. When you came from a family of prominence, you were to act as such. And you were to pass that on to your children. Obviously, just from the pedigree of Saul, we could see that he was destined to do great things. That he was destined to be a man among people. Saul's assignment from our text does not fit the category of great things. It does not. First thing we find out is that Kish loses his donkeys. Saul is told to go find the donkeys. You know, as a man of prominence, as a man of a prominent family, this doesn't seem like a great assignment. It doesn't seem like something that a man of valor should be doing. In 1 Samuel 9:3 it says, Kish said to his son, Saul, take one of the servants with you and go look for the donkeys. That's the assignment. But first of all, we need to understand, donkeys were of little or no value. People of means did not use donkeys for much of anything, because they were pack animals. They were beasts of burden. They were used to carry those heavy loads, usually for those who couldn't afford an ox cart. Donkeys were a sign of poverty. And so the fact that Kish and his family would have donkeys is surprising. But they could have been a source of income. He may have sold them to poor people. We don't know why he had donkeys. But donkeys were often associated, and really they still are, with contemptible things. And so Saul had to be thinking, well, couldn't just servants go look for them? Why send me your son? Why couldn't the servants have done this? Put yourself in Saul's place for a moment. Look at how he's described in verse 2 of 1 Samuel 9. He had a son named Saul, so impressive, an impressive young man, without equal among the Israelites, a head taller than any of the others. So he was an impressive young man. To look at him, he was impressive. He was without equal. I mean, and here he knows how powerful, he knows how important and influential his family has been. He's got a pretty good idea of what his relationship is in the family, what his status is. He understands his heritage. You know you've got virtually unlimited talent and opportunity in front of you. An opportunity to be great. And your father calls you in. You've got to be thinking, what great thing is he going to tell me? Go look for the donkeys. Saul overqualified for going to look for donkeys? Probably. Probably. It's about like asking a heart surgeon to fix an ingrown toenail. Asking a PhD to teach a preschool. Not that they couldn't or shouldn't, but they're a bit overqualified for the task. And that's where Saul was. He was a man of prominence, of great potential. God will often ask us to do things which we might think we're overqualified to do. I mean, we see that in people. There are many things that need done, and let somebody else do that. Anybody can do that. If we look at Matthew chapter 25 and verse 40, it's kind of what it's about in the great judgment scene. In Matthew 25 and verse 40, it says, the king will reply, I tell you the truth, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers of mine, you did for me. You know, we go back and read that passage, and what do we see? Common, ordinary, everyday acts of service. Feeding the hungry, giving drink to the thirsty, visiting the lonely and the sick, visiting those in prison, clothing the naked, things we can all do. And Jesus is speaking to those who saw those needs and did that. They took care of them. But to the other group, the ones on the left, the goats, they saw the same needs. But they didn't meet those needs. Maybe they felt they were overqualified. Because anybody could do that. So we'll just let somebody else do it. You see, God will often call us to do the menial tasks. And part of that's just the challenge of our obedience. Because remember, Jesus says, if you can't be trusted with little, you can never be trusted with a lot. And so if we have a small job to do, and we do it, then God will trust us with the larger ones. Well, what we see, of course, is the chase is unsuccessful. Saul and the servant, they go out, and they could not find the donkeys. And verse 4 of 1 Samuel 9, it says, so he passed through the hill country of Ephraim, through the area around Shalisa, and he did not find them. They went on to the district of Shalim, but the donkeys were not there. He passed through the territory of Benjamin, but they did not find them. Now you know, this has to be discouraging. They're on this mission to find these donkeys, but nowhere can they find them. And you know it's frustrating. I don't know how many of you have experienced this, but I know when I grew up, we had horses, and they would get out, and we would have to go look for them. That doesn't sound like a big deal, but they can be anywhere. Especially when you don't know that they're missing. See, when I grew up, our horses weren't at the house. They were at a farm about 2-3 miles away from us. And then the guy that actually lived on the farm would call and say, hey, I haven't seen your horses for a couple days. So we'd get in the truck, go out, and look for them. And guess what? We didn't have four-wheelers. We was like Saul and the servant. We had to walk. And we'd go out and look. And my grandfather grew up, he had cows. Same thing. They'd come in to eat, he'd look, say, oh, we're missing a few. Go find them. And then you don't find them, it's so discouraging. So you look, and you wonder if you'll ever find it. No matter what we're looking for, it's always discouraging not to find it, isn't it? You ever go through the house looking for something and not be able to find it? Because you put it somewhere where you wouldn't forget? We do that a lot, don't we? And then we forget. Saul, at this point, began to compare values. Remember, donkeys were pretty much worthless. So now he begins to compare values. In verse 5, it says, when they reached the district of Zuph, Saul said to the servant who was with him, come, Let us go back, or my father will stop thinking about donkeys and start worrying about us. Because he knew the donkeys had little value, but here is Kish's son and a servant, both of high value. Both meant a lot to Kish. And so he started comparing the values, thinking, well, we can just let the donkeys go because my father will forget about those and wonder what happened to us. You don't know where we've all been. You don't know what we've accomplished or who we've run into. Because they've been searching for 2 or 3 days. And so now Saul says it's time to go back home. It's time to call off the search and go back home. Friends, the land of Zuph is where many of us end up. This is where preachers and teachers experience burnout and disappointment. This is where you feel like the dreams for your life have died. It's where you feel like the purpose of your life has been choked out. This is where you want to give up. We've all come to Zuph once or twice in our life, I'm sure. Come to the point where we just want to give up. Because we feel like it's fruitless. It's useless. Zuph actually means dripping honeycomb. However, it seems Saul, like we often do, find nothing but stinging bees there. And we get discouraged. And we want to turn away. That's where Saul's at. That's where the servant is. The servant, instead of giving up, he presents an idea. Verse 6, 1 Samuel chapter 9. But the servant replied, look, in this town there is a man of God. He is highly respected, and everything he says comes true. Let's go there now. Perhaps he will tell us what way to take. Friends, turning to God is never a bad idea. Turning to God is never wrong. And that's what the servant says. Saul, let's go see this man. Everything he says comes true. He's always right. Oh, but there's a problem. It was customary when someone went to see the seer, as he was called in those days, that they would offer him something. They would offer him something for his services. Saul says, oh, we got this dried out old bread. We can't offer the seer this. He's not going to help us if we can't offer him anything. The servant said, don't worry. I've got a quarter shekel of silver. We'll give him that. And so off they go. Off they go. See, the servant has come up with the answer twice now. And so Saul must believe him. It's time to go. Brings us to being in the right place at the right time. We're being in the wrong place at the wrong time. But sometimes we are at the right place in the right time. Chasing donkeys can put us in contact with servants of God. Chasing donkeys can put us exactly where God wants us. And since the servant advised Saul to seek out the prophet of God, that's where he put him, in the presence of God. And as they're going into Zuph, they found young women coming out to draw water. And they asked them, where is the seer? And they told him, well, he's getting ready to go up and do a sacrifice up in the high place. There's people that's invited him up there to eat. You can go meet him in town. He's on his way there now. And so Saul and the servant, they go into town to meet the seer. See, here's this task, this menial task, to go out and search for essentially worthless idols, that put them in the right place. I mean, these tasks may seem meaningless to us, but to God, they all have purpose. To God, He put us there for a reason. You know, we're quick to say everything happens for a reason. And if that's true, then there are no meaningless tasks. There are nothing that's useless. It's all going to be for our benefit and our good. Even though it may seem like something that somebody else could do, somebody else should do, God puts us in there where He wants us, in the right place at the right time. We just have to listen. We just need to be obedient. Look at what Jesus says in Mark chapter 9, verse 41. Whoever gives you a cup of water to drink because of your name as followers of Christ, truly I say to you, he will not lose his reward. I mean, giving somebody a cup of water, that's so what? Pretty simple, right? But Jesus is saying it's just as important as anything else we do. There are no small tasks. They all have purpose. They all have reason. It's about stepping up and doing what God asks. I mean, we probably go through life and thinking about things that may be opportunities we've missed because we thought, man, that's not going to amount to anything. But we never know until we do it. Because it might be exactly where God wants us to be. It might be the situation God puts us in so He can do something else for us. The servant and Saul, they go to stuff. They find Samuel, the man of God. They follow the directions. They go. They find Samuel on his way to the high place. So, was chasing donkeys part of God's plan for Saul? Was it an accident? Or was this all a grand scheme by God? 1 Samuel 9, 15 and 16. Now the day before Saul came, the Lord had revealed this to Samuel. About this time tomorrow, I'll send you a man from the land of Benjamin, anoint him leader over my people Israel. What if Saul, after a day of searching, said, nah, I'm done? What if he had told the servant, when the servant said, let's go seek out the seer? Nah, I'm not going to do that. We got nothing to give him. You hold on to your quarter shekel of silver. We're not going. We're not going. But this is what God had planned for Saul. To get him in the presence of Samuel so Saul could be anointed king over Israel. I mean, he could have done it just like he did with David, right? He could have sent Saul to Benjamin and anoint Saul at his house. But that's not what he did. Isn't it funny how when you look back at these events, how they're all related? How it comes together to give us the plan of God? We don't always see God's plan in our actions. We don't always see what God has planned out in the future. And it's not always about extraordinary services. It's not always about doing the big thing. But it's about being obedient. It's about being obedient to God and allowing Him to put us in the proper places. See, and sometimes the proper places is just being in the proper mindset. Listening for God's voice. Looking for God's direction. Looking for opportunities to serve. And seeing the open doors before us. Now, I don't know about you, but I've never really seen a flashy neon sign with arrows pointing, God's door's open, enter here. It don't usually work that way. But when we have a heart of service and a mind to reach out to others, God's putting us in the right place. to achieve something for His purpose. And that's why we exist, right? To achieve God's purpose. That's why we're here. To serve God. That's what Solomon said, that's the purpose of all men, to fear God and keep His commandments. So that's what we do. Even in the menial things. Remember, Saul was ready to give up and return home. He was ready to quit. But God brought him to Zuph for a reason. God put him with this servant that would be able to convince him to go on in to the city. That would seek out the man of God. In 1 Samuel chapter 10 and verse 1 said, Then Samuel took a flask of oil and poured it on Saul's head and kissed him, saying, Has not the Lord anointed you leader over all his inheritance? Imagine being Saul and this happening to you. And you're thinking back to when your father called you in and said, Go find the donkeys. And you're thinking, what? Go do what? Can't somebody else do it? Nope. So we see the hand of God at work in all of this. Because it would have been simple just to send servants. And more than likely, if God's hand's not in it, that's who goes. But Kish sent his son as God had moved him. Listening and being obedient to God is going to lead to great things. Oh, we're all not going to become kings over God's people. But we're going to receive a crown. A crown of life. It's a great thing. Being servant of the Most High God. Being obedient to Him. Friends, I know we often want to pick and choose what we do in service to God. Sometimes we may look at something and come up with reasons why we can't. I'm sure Saul could have. But he was obedient first to his father. And that made him obedient to God. Friends, I'm going to tell you. Sometimes God calls us to chase donkeys. He does. God calls us to do the menial tasks. He calls us to do things that anybody could do. Ours is just to be obedient and do them. Not to argue. Not to ask Him why. Okay, God. It's your plan. Maybe we don't see the significance of going to visit someone. Or taking food to someone. Sitting with someone who might be lonely. Or even getting someone a cup of cold water. Maybe we don't see the significance of any of that. But believe me, you're touching hearts and you're pleasing God. You're doing what God has called you to do. And that's what we need to think about. You know, maybe we don't realize God's plans for our lives. And maybe you're at yours up right now. Don't turn around and leave. Go in and seek for God's direction. Because I'll guarantee you, He has a plan for you. You just have to be willing to work it out, to listen, and follow His direction. If you're here this morning and you've never been baptized for remission of sins, you have the opportunity. God's desire is that all men be saved. But He gives you the choice. He gives you the choice. So if you choose to be saved, if you choose to be a child of God, you can be immersed this morning and come up out of the water of baptism. A brand new creation. Child of God. Free from sin. And that's your choice. Christian, maybe you've hit yours up and you're ready to turn around and quit. Go to God. Go in to Zuph this morning and seek out God's advice. Seek out His direction. He'll tell you what He wants you to do. If you'd like the prayers of the church for any reason, for physical healing, spiritual healing, We'll lift you up to God in prayer. And He'll listen. He'll listen. Because we're your family, we love you, and we want what's best for you. And God is your Father, and He loves you more than anyone. And He wants what's best for you as well. So whatever you might need to respond to God to this morning, please do so as we stand and as we sing.